Last winter, I decided to expand on my interest in professional wrestling via a series of videos documenting my favorite matches and moments throughout the course of a calendar year. Given that we're just past the halfway point, I thought it would be a good time to take a step back and reflect on the bigger picture. This also provides a chance to try something different with these videos, in addition to the monthly series. I should point out that my criteria here is primarily based from a creative standpoint. If you want more discussion about individual matches and in-ring work, check out the monthly series for that sort of thing. This is not a numbers video either, as things like TV ratings, ticket sales, or cage match ratings have no influence on my own enjoyment of a wrestling product. Obviously, this will only cover promotions that I follow closely, and that may not include your favorites. If you feel that something is missing, feel free to let me know what I missed out on in the comments section below. With all that being said, here are some of my takeaways from the good and the bad from the last 6 months, as well as what I am hopeful for as we head into the second half. It's clear that a lot of the major companies have taken this year to lay a lot of the groundwork for the future. I think New Japan is one of the stronger examples of this, really shaking up what has become a relatively stale product coming out of the pandemic. With an influx of young talent, a reshuffling of the deck with its factions, and some new championships established, it's clear that they're inching closer to a new era in the company. Not everything has been great, but it's nice to see them trying new things and putting on some of the better shows they've had in years. The addition of a dedicated women's division late last year opened the door for Mercedes Moné to begin her post-WWE career in style, and I hope they leave some room for more expansion in the future. WWE has had transition more on the corporate level, and the less said about that the better, though from a creative standpoint, they found themselves with most if not all of their eggs in the Bloodline basket. As we get closer to the finale of Roman's story, I can't help but wonder what or if they have something else ready to go. But clearly they're focused on riding out the wave of massive momentum that they've generated. I'll touch more on this later. AEW isn't necessarily in a transitional period, but more so a phase of sorting out a lot of their ideas and their roster with a new 2-hour show added into the mix. Again, a bit more on them later. STARDOM have built on their momentum from the previous year while switching up some of their recent booking trends. Primarily in how the main titles have been handled, as Julia's World of Stardom reign only lasted 4 months, while the white belt changed hands 3 times since April. The common denominator of both the red and white belts has been Tam Nakano, and I think your enjoyment of the promotion may vary depending on how much you actually like her work. And even if you're not a fan of her work, the additions of Suzu Suzuki, Saori Anou, and Mei Seira have been great, adding to what was already one of the strongest rosters you can find. April's All-Star Grand Queendom event marked their biggest show to date, and is still my favorite show of the year up to this point. And moving on to Noah, what is certainly a transitional period as well, I think the argument could be made that they've made some of the most drastic changes amongst their peers. Things like the acquisition and resulting push of Jake Lee, the end of the Congo faction, and the reunion of Axis have left the promotion barely resembling itself from a year ago, though there is not a single change in the entire wrestling industry that compares to Kenoh becoming Blue Kenoh. Joking aside, it's too soon to tell if this is a step towards their former glory, or if the arc has to weather yet another storm. A common thread I've noticed between most of these promotions is that you're almost guaranteed to find quality of some sort, though it might not be at the top of the card all the time. The best way I can describe this is with a long-winded anecdote. Is Roman Reigns taking a month off of TV? Here's a great run of Gunther matches to occupy the time. Is MJF's gimmick that he doesn't wrestle frequently? Here's a weekly Orange Cassidy title defense, ranging from decent to very good. Not a Sonata fan? Here's a Zack Sabre Jr. match kept within a 15-minute time limit, and maybe a women's title match too. Are you one of the many Jake Lee detractors? Then give El Hijo del Dr. Wagner Jr. a chance. The cliche of the Workhorse title is alive and well. I believe that is an overall positive, regardless of how you may feel about these individual wrestlers' gimmicks or in-ring style. It's nice to know going into a show that there's a surefire section of the card that will deliver, especially if you're burnt out in the current main event style. In recent years, this has not been the case, which is why I've been so enthusiastic about these specific reigns, especially when they're up for grabs in or against other promotions. The obvious example of crossover success this year is another Forbidden Door, though there have been plenty of exciting crossover across Japan this year in a way that hasn't occurred in quite some time. I can't necessarily speak for the business side of things or get into any of the interpromotional politics, but I can offer my own perspective on how these instances have expanded my tastes and made for a more exciting viewing experience. Keiji Muto's retirement show is the best example of this. This night would also be the introduction to the Noah All Japan feud that is still ongoing at time of recording. The 6-man tag match is available for free on Pro Wrestling Noah's YouTube at the moment, and it kicks all kinds of ass. They were able to expand on this feud while saving the anticipated Nakajima-Miyahara match for later down the line, while also beginning a stretch where Kenoh wanted to collect as many tag belts as possible, first winning All Japans in March with Manabu Soya, and then Dragon Gates opened the Twin Gate titles with Shuji Kondo a month later. At the beginning of the year, I couldn't tell you much about current All Japan or Dragon Gate, aside from a few glimpses of crossover. This single storyline introduced a variety of wrestlers and matches that I've really enjoyed and will continue to going forward. All Japan in particular has put on consistently solid shows, featuring guest appearances from New Japan, Noah, as well as GLEAT, making things a little bit more familiar as opposed to going in completely blind. I'm still getting acquainted with Dragon Gate, but the reputation for faction-based junior heavyweight action precedes them. Hiromu Takahashi appearing on the card for Kobe World in July reinforces that nothing is really off the table at the moment in regards to crossover, and that makes things very exciting. There's also the small matter of the Okada-Kiyomiya feud, which has been one of, if not my favorite all year, and central to the character shift Okada is undergoing at the moment. Is it required to watch all of these promotions? Of course not. Though it does help illustrate the overall story that wrestling is telling this year, it also provides context as to why something like Kento Miyahara rocking up to a random Noah show is a big deal, and why the prospect of Kaito Kiyomiya's guest appearance in New Japan's G1 Climax tournament is so intriguing. It's the perfect time for this type of unity, as full capacity cheering crowds have only just returned months ago. I'm trying my best to embrace it while we get these type of shows like All Together Again in the Junior Heavyweight All-Star Festival. This period has given me a lot to look forward to, especially when things here in the States haven't always been great from a mainstream point of view. I usually emphasize positives on this channel, though genuine criticism is very important amongst any sort of fandom or hobby. It's why in the monthly videos I try to offer an argument as to why someone might not like a match as much as I do. It's been a pretty great half year from an in-ring perspective, though most of my issues exist in the mainstream week-to-week television in America. It's been wildly inconsistent across AEW and WWE main roster, ranging from some truly memorable episodes with top-tier wrestling matches to months of shows where little to nothing happens. I try to approach WWE criticism in a different light, since they're simply not ever going to be the type of wrestling promotion I'd prefer. That doesn't make them incapable of putting on a good match, TV show, or pay-per-view, but they simply know what they want to be and don't have to change for anyone because, well, they're WWE. However, for how many times they pat themselves on the back for being the storytelling company, there really hasn't been all that much of it outside of the Bloodline. Now that isn't to say that the Bloodline stuff hasn't been good, I'm simply just not emotionally invested in it as I was at the beginning of the year. I feel that it peaked at the Royal Rumble with an all-time angle in the company's history, but that ship has long sailed. They have a formula that clearly works. I just think I've started to grow tired of it, especially in the context of Roman Reigns' main event matches. You can set your watch to a ref bump at this point. I'm still eager to see how they reach a conclusion to the story. I just think it's taken away much needed attention from practically anything else. There's not much else substantial happening on the rest of the TV shows. Lately it feels like the only essential viewing is a Bloodline, Judgment Day, or Cody angle that you might as well watch on YouTube the next day, rendering a lot of the TV show pointless. There are a lot of wrestlers I really enjoy in WWE, and all I really ask is to see them have more to do. Give Bianca Belair a feud that will let her develop her own character. Let Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens actually establish a tag division, or give someone like Tegan Nox some TV time in general. At this point, Rhea Ripley has had as many title belts as championship feuds, and I could keep going on like this ad nauseum. There's talent up and down the card that could be involved in actual stories to give us a reason to stick around for the whole show. Unfortunately, a lot of the time it just feels empty, and you're better off just tuning into the pay-per-view events, or PLEs, or whatever vernacular they want you to use. On the flip side, AEW's television has been a tale of two pay-per-view cycles. If you think back to late February, there was a lot of negative feedback towards the build or lack thereof leading to Revolution. In spite of this, the wrestling during that period was fantastic. delivering very good to great matches on a weekly basis. You had Bryan Danielson's stellar run of TV matches coinciding with the Moxley-Hangman feud, Darby Allin's TNT title run, MJF versus Takeshita, and Jamie Hayter at the peak of her championship reign. You even got some of the better matches to take place on Rampage, and even a Battle of the Belts episode that didn't feel like a complete afterthought. So what changed? I think the storyline criticisms were heard for the Double or Nothing pay-per-view cycle, but unfortunately the efforts to address it were poorly executed. You had every episode of Dynamite anchored by the Four Pillar storyline, which in my opinion was a huge misfire. We've seen in the past that Dynamite can thrive when revolving around one major storyline, the strongest examples being Hangman and Kenny in late 2021 and the MJF Punk feud in early 2022. MJF is particularly great at crafting intense, personal feuds based in off-screen reality, but here it relied more on fourth wall breaking promos from everyone involved. The fake tournament arc wasn't fooling anyone either, nor were any of the false alliances between each competitor. The only lasting effects of this storyline that seemed worthwhile was the villain origin story for Jungle Boy, though the jury is still out on that one. At this point I can't say that this feud necessarily helped anyone. The ongoing Elite vs. Blackpool Combat Club feud felt more substantial in comparison, if by now it's overstayed its welcome. The Moxley-Omega cage match was a great piece of TV, taking into account all of the run-ins before the match itself, and the Don Callis turn at the end. It's chaotic, yet seamless TV segment to propel this feud into the next gear, but if anything I found myself more ready for the Omega-Takeshita feud rather than the blood and guts blow-off itself. I didn't mind this program, though I feel it wasn't everything that it could have been due to some rehashed ideas and of course all of the unfortunate injuries, and that's no one's fault. Bryan Danielson didn't wrestle at all between pay-per-views, and now will obviously miss the conclusion, and I also believe Matt Jackson has been injured this whole time as well. Regardless, when you have 12 people stretched across 2 main event programs, it can cause an imbalance in your card construction for both television and pay-per-view, and I feel like that was painfully noticeable here. Dynamite is a show that can get by simply on the quality of its wrestling, but when you put your focus elsewhere, it has to stick the landing, and I don't necessarily think it did during these months. Things seem to have turned a corner after Double or Nothing with another Forbidden Door season in the books, as well as a new live 2-hour show in the rotation. I think this gives them a good opportunity to organize their creative as well as their roster moving forward, giving both the Wednesday and Saturday show their own feel and identity. Staying under the Tony Khan umbrella, I do want to touch on Ring of Honor, as it's been frustrating to say the least. I still want to give it the benefit of the doubt though, as it's only been 4 months since the weekly series launched on Honor Club. I think its original intent was a pure one, though a massive wrench was thrown into its production. When taped in studio, you get a much more enthusiastic show between its booking and the audience. Those people are there to see Ring of Honor, not only showing up to or staying past a Dynamite taping. Removing the block taping schedule also hinders the week-to-week stories from progressing and limits the guest appearances as well. I'm not quite sure where the solution here lies. I understand they have to prioritize 2 live AEW shows a week between one staff. I hope there's some sort of recalibration coming out of Death Before Dishonor, because there's still a lot to like here. The Eddie Kingston-Claudio Castagnoli feud in March has been a highlight of the entire wrestling year, and Athena has been one of the better wrestlers between both ROH and AEW. There are reasons to tune in every week, and legitimate pieces to build around. It just needs a dedicated direction going forward. And that's it from me. If you've gotten this far into the video, thank you so much for your time and for hearing what I have to say. I've had a lot of fun starting this channel, and it's been a great outlet for me personally, so I appreciate you checking it out in any capacity. Let me know if you enjoy this looser discussion style of video in addition to the monthly series. I'm open to adding the odd ramble here and there. Please do all the obligatory YouTube stuff by liking and subscribing, and follow me on Twitter at OuterStevan. I'll talk to you again next time, taking a look at my favorite matches from July.